Mahesh. We created Agent Skills. In this talk, we'll show you why we stopped building agents and started building skills instead. A lot of things have changed since our last talk. MCE became the standard for agent connectivity. Claude Code, our first coding agent, launched to the world. And our Claude Agent SDK now provides a production-ready agent out of the box. We have a more mature ecosystem, and we're moving towards a new paradigm for agents. That paradigm is a tighter coupling between the model and the runtime environment. But simply, we think code is all we need. We used to think agents in different domains will look very different. Each one will need its own tools and scaffolding, and that means we'll have a separate agent for each use case for each domain. Well, customization is still important for each domain. The agent underneath is actually more universal than we thought. What we realized is that code is not just a use case, but a universal interface to the digital world. After we built Claude Code, we realized that Claude Code is actually a general purpose agent. Think about generating a financial report. The model can call the API to pull in data and do research. It can organize that data in a file system. You can analyze it with Python, and then synthesize the insight in O file format, all through code. The core scaffolding can suddenly become as thin as just Bash and file system, which is great and really scalable, but we very quickly run into a different problem. And that problem is domain expertise. Who do you want doing your taxes? Is it going to be Mahesh, the 300 IQ mathematical genius, or is it Barry, an experienced tax professional? Right? I would pick Barry every time. I don't want Mahesh to figure out the 2025 tax code from first principles. I need consistent execution from a domain expert. Agents today are a lot like Mahesh. They're brilliant, but they lack expertise. They can do, no more slow. They can do amazing things when you really put in effort and give proper guidance, but they're often missing the important context up front. They can't really absorb your expertise super well, and they don't learn over time. That's why we created Agent Skills. Skills are organized collections of files that package composable procedural knowledge for agents. In other words, they're folders. This simplicity is deliberate. We want something that anyone, human or agent, can create and use as long as they have a computer. These also work with what you already have. You can version them in Git, you can throw them in Google Drive, and you can zip them up and share it with your team. We have used files as a primitive for decades, and we like them, so why change now? Because of that, skills can also include a lot of scripts as tools. Traditional tools have pretty obvious problems. Some tools have poorly written instructions and are pretty ambiguous, and when the model is struggling, you can't really make a change to the tool, so it's just kind of stuck with a code star problem. And they always live in the context window. Code solves some of these issues. It's self-documenting, it is modifiable, and it can live in the file system until they're really needed and used. Here's an example of a script inside of a skill. We kept seeing Claude write the same Python script over and over again to apply styling to slides, so we just asked Claude to save it inside of the skill as a tool for its future self. Now we can just run the script, and that makes everything a lot more consistent and a lot more efficient. At this point, skills can contain a lot of information, and we want to protect the context window so that we can fit in hundreds of skills and make them truly composable. That's why skills are progressively disclosed. At runtime, only this metadata is shown to the model just to indicate that it has the skill. When an agent needs to use a skill, you can read in the rest of the skill.md, which contains the core instruction and directory for the rest of the folder. Everything else inside of the skill as a tool for its future self. Now we can just run the script, and that makes everything a lot more consistent and a lot more efficient. At this point, skills can contain a lot of information, and we want to protect the context window so that we can fit in hundreds of skills and make them truly composable. That's why skills are progressively disclosed. At runtime, only this metadata is shown to the model just to indicate that it has the skill. When an agent needs to use a skill, you can read in the rest of the skill.md, which contains the core instruction and directory for the rest of the folder. Everything else is just organized for ease of access. So that's all skills are. They're organized folders with scripts as tools.
Since our launch 5 weeks ago, this very simple design has translated into a very quickly growing ecosystem of thousands of skills. And we've seen this be split across a couple of different types of skills. There are foundational skills, third-party skills created by partners in the ecosystem, and skills built within an enterprise and within teams. To start, foundational skills are those that give agents new general capabilities or domain-specific capabilities that it didn't have before. We ourselves, with our launch, built document skills that give Claude the ability to create and edit professional quality Office documents. We're also really excited to see people at Cadence build scientific research skills that give Claude new capabilities like EHR data analysis and using common Python bioinformatics libraries better than it could before. We've also seen partners in the ecosystem build that help Claude better with their own products. BrowserBase is a pretty good example of this. They built a skill for their open source browser automation tooling, StageHand. And now Claude, equipped with this skill and with StageHand, can now go navigate the web and use a browser effectively to get work done. And Notion launched a bunch of skills that help Claude better understand your Notion workspace and do deep research over your entire workspace. And I think where I've seen the most excitement and traction with skills is within large enterprises. These are company and team-specific skills built for an organization. We've been talking to Fortune 100s that are using skills as a way to teach agents about their organizational best practices and the weird and unique ways that they use this bespoke internal software. We're also talking to really large developer productivity teams, thousands of developers in an organization that are using skills like Claude Code and teach them about code best practices and other ways that they want their developers to work internally. So all of these different types of skills are created and consumed by different people inside of an organization or in the world, but what they have in common is anyone can create them, and they give agents new capabilities capabilities they didn't have before. So as the ecosystem has grown, to observe a couple of interesting trends. First, skills are starting to get more complex. The most basic skill today can still be a skill.d markdown file with some really basic instructions. But we're starting to see skills that package symbols, binaries, code, scripts, assets, and a lot more. And a lot of the skills that are being built today might take minutes or hours to build and put into an agent. But we think that increasingly, much like a lot of the software we use today, these skills might take weeks or months to build and be maintained. We're also seeing that this ecosystem of skills is complementing the existing ecosystem of MCP servers that was built up over the course of this year. Developers are using and building skills that orchestrate workflows of multiple MCP tools stitched together to do more complex things with XML data and connectivity. And in these cases, MCP is providing the connection to the outside world, while skills are providing the expertise. And finally, and I think most excitingly for me personally, is we're seeing skills that are being built by people that aren't technical. These are people in functions like finance, recruiting, accounting, legal, and a lot more. And I think this is pretty early validation of our initial idea that skills help people that aren't doing coding work extend the general agents, and they make these agents more accessible for the day-to-day of what these people are working on. So tying this all together, let's talk about how these all fit into this emerging architecture of general agents. First, we think this architecture is coming on a couple of things. The first is this agent loop that helps manage the model internal in and out. And this is coupled with a runtime environment, a file system and the ability to read and write code. This agent, as many of us have done throughout this year, can be connected to MCP servers. And these are tools and data from the outside world, agent more relevant and more. Now, we get hundreds of skills that pull into context only at runtime when deciding to work on a particular task. Today, giving an agent a new capability in a new domain might just involve equipping it with the right set of MCP servers and the right library of skills. And this emerging pattern of an agent with an MCP server and a set of skills is something that's already helping us at Anthropic deploy Claude to new verticals. Just after we launched Skills 5 weeks ago, we immediately launched new offerings in financial services and came with a set of MCP servers for professionals in each of these domains. We're also starting to think about some of the other open questions and areas that we want to focus on for how skills evolve in the future. As they start to become more complex, we really want to support developers, enterprises, and other skill builders by starting to treat skills like we treat software. This means exploring testing and evaluation, better tooling to make sure that these agents are loaded of an agent equipped with a skill to make sure that's on par with what the agent is supposed to be. We'd also like to focus on versioning. As a skill evolves and the resulting agent behavior evolves, we want this to be clearly tracked and to have a clear lineage over time. We'd also like to explore skills that explicitly depend on and refer to either other skills, MCP servers, and dependencies and packages within the agent's environment. We think that this is going to make agents a lot more predictable in different runtime environments, and the composability of multiple skills together will help agents like Claude elicit even more complex and relevant behavior from these agents. Overall, these set of things should hopefully make skills easier to build and easier to integrate into agent products, even those besides Claude. Finally, a huge part of the value of skills, we think, is going to come from sharing and distribution. Barry and I think a lot about the future of companies that are deploying these agents at scale. And the vision that excites us most is one of a collective and evolving knowledge base of capabilities that's carried by people and agents. They provide for your agents to do useful things. And as you interact with an agent and demand more institutional knowledge, it starts to get better, and all of the agents inside your team and your org get better as well. And when someone joins your team and starts using Claude for the first time, it already knows what your team cares about. It knows about your day-to-day, and it knows about how to be most effective for the work that you're doing. And as this grows and this ecosystem starts to develop even more, this compound value is going to extend outside of just your org and into the broader community. So just like when someone else across the world builds an MCP server that makes your agent more useful, a skill built by someone else in the community will help make your own agents more capable, reliable, and useful as well.
This vision of an evolving knowledge base gets even more powerful when Claude starts to create these skills. We design skills specifically as concrete steps towards continuous learning. When you first start using Claude, this standard gives a very important guarantee. Anything that Claude writes down can be used efficiently by a future version of itself. The learning actually transferable. As you build up the context, skills make the concept of memory more tangible. They don't capture everything. They don't capture every type of information, just procedural knowledge that Claude can use on specific tasks. We have worked with Claude for quite a while. The flexibility of skills matters even more. Claude can acquire new capabilities instantly, evolve them as needed, and then drop the ones that become obsolete. This is what we have always known. The power of in-context learning makes this a lot more cost-effective for information that change on a daily basis. Our goal is that Claude on day 30 of working with you is going to be a lot better on Claude on day 1. Claude can already create skills for you today using our skill creator skill, and we're going to continue pushing in that direction. We're going to conclude by comparing the agent stack and computing. In a rough analogy, models, Both require massive investment and contain immense potential. Then we start building operating system. The OS made processors far more valuable by orchestrating the processes, resources, and data around the processor. In AI, we believe that agent runtime is starting to play this role. We're all trying to build the cleanest, most efficient, and most scalable abstractions to get the right tokens in. We have a platform. The real value comes from applications. A few companies build processors and operating systems, but millions of developers like us have built softwares that encoded domain expertise and our unique points of view. We hope that skills can help us open up this layer for everyone. This is where we get creative and solve concrete problems for ourselves, for each other, and for the world, just by putting stuff in the folder. So skills are just the starting point.
To close out, we think we're now converging on this general architecture for general agents. We've created skills as a new paradigm for shipping and sharing new capabilities. So we think it's time to stop rebuilding agents and start building skills instead. And if you're excited about this, come work with us and start building some skills today. Thank you.
$1 million a year in profit for beginners. I use Claude Code every day to manage a business that does, and then what activity, but naturally and gradually, so that everybody here is on the same page. So no fluff. You're going to this course. We're going to start with the basics by I'll integrated development environments, or IDEs. There's several on the market, and I'm going to walk you guys to the same page. Afterwards, I'll show you how to set up your project brain, which is also known as the claude.md file. Once we're done with that, we'll use Claude Code to actually build something, because the focus of this whole course is on practical building. We'll build a simple web app hosted live on you guys learn by doing, not just sitting around me. After that, we'll read the subagents folder and a bunch of functionality that not a lot of people know about. We'll then cover Claude Code's various modes, including their plan mode, which you guys might have heard about, dangerously skip permissions mode, which gained a fair amount of notoriety recently, and how to use them, as well as use them safely. We'll then cover complex project builds using plan mode and what I just showed you guys. After that, we'll cover context management, which is quite the term right now. I'll teach you guys all about how to manage your context efficiently, avoid context fraud, and ensure that your prompts are built and structured in high ROI. I'll run you through every slash command in Claude Code and how to use them. We'll then cover hooks cyclically before or after every Claude Code tool call. Useful to know. Talk about Claude Code skills, which is basically how to create these skill files that turn Claude Code into a bunch of different specialized agents. We'll then cover model context protocol and how to set it up effectively. I'll talk about a handful of automated systems that you guys can quickly build with model context protocol, including email managers. You can build your own bookkeeper and more. I'll cover Claude Code plugins and marketplaces, the Chrome DevTools integration, which is a very slept-on connection between Claude Code and Chrome that enables you to collect data from sources that don't have APIs. It's very, very valuable to learn. We'll then cover Claude Code subagents with scoped tool access. I'll talk about their new agent team feature and how to use them productively, and then Git work trees and session mobility, which essentially will allow you to spin up parallel cloud sessions without a lot of the downsides and issues that things like ClaudeBot or OpenClaude have unfortunately resolved. Deployment, basically how to take your automations and run them in production modal with GitHub code on the web. So we've got quite a lot to cover. Let's just dive right into it with the first as a total beginner. So the first thing we have to do is we actually have to purchase Claude Code. And the reason why is because they don't offer it for their free plan at $0. In order to access to Claude Code, you need at least their pro plan for everyday productivity. I'd recommend this if you guys are starting out. The money that you spend on a subscription like this is so small compared to the massive productivity benefits that, despite the fact that it's $17, personally would not even raise an eyebrow. It's no small stretch to say that Claude Code probably delivers me productivity benefits on the order of $10,000 to $15,000 a month, because it's not only just skilled as a developer might be, which allows me to build system stresses and strain in my life. My second brain at this point. After you click try Claude, it'll take you in, and once you're done, you can then create your account for the very first. So I'd select both of these. I'm not going to grab take agent updates because email inbox is busy enough, and have an onboarding screen with some personal information. So I'm just going to fill that out, and then once I'm done, circle back. Okay, so I'm Canadian, and unfortunately, our dollar $17 that we saw earlier is $20 in my own currency. I'm going to click Get Pro Plan, and then walk through the payment details below. Cool, and now I have a Claude subscription. This is all that you need in order to get set up. Everything else is totally free. From here on out, the simplest way to get up and running with Claude Code is just opening up a terminal instance. That'll seem pretty intimidating to a lot of you, so I'm not just going to show you how to do it in the terminal. I'm also going to show you how to do it using what's called their graphical user interface, which they put together 4 or 5 months ago. Any resource that I show you throughout this course is probably going to look a little different by the time that you look at it versus when I'm looking at it. And that's because Claude Code, Anthropic, and just AI tools in general change really quickly, especially since most of the developers are also using Claude Code, so it kind of multiplies the productivity here. What's important is not the specific layout, the colors, the on the screen. What's more important is that you just know how to find it. And so the number one Claude Code features is in the Claude Code documentation. It's at code.claude.com/docs. Whatever language you speak, just pump in there, and then it'll automatically translate that over to. So the Claude Code, and then to install Claude Code in your system for the first time, you can run what's called a curl command here. If you're running PowerShell, you can run this. Windows CMD, you can run that. Just the same page here. When you have little snippets of text like this, they're telling you to do is basically prompt. So on Mac OS, Linux, or WSL, which are all type terminal. When you do so, you then get a terminal. Now, this terminal might look a little intimidating to you if it's your first time ever using something like that, but don't worry about it too much. I just wanted to show you guys how easy it is to get set up with Claude Code in this, and then afterwards, as mentioned, we'll do the graphical user interface stuff. Okay, so this is what it looks like on Mac. If you guys are on a Windows, then you'll have to use the Windows key search bar and look up something like CMD or command prompt. At the end of it, you'll get something that looks pretty similar to this. From here on out, all you have to do is you have to copy over the command that it gives us. So because we want a native install, and I'm in Mac OS, I'm just going to copy over this command. I also click this little button over here, and then I'll tab back. I'm then going to paste it in and press enter. From here on out, a bunch of complicated things are going to occur. You don't already have it installed, it may take you a little bit longer, but now we're good to go. Claude Code is installed on our computer. Once you're done with all that, all you have to do in order to use Claude is just type the word Claude directly into your terminal. It's really that. All you have to do in order to use Claude is just the first time that you're logging in, you'll also have to authenticate. And it'll ask you to do so automatically when you open this up. If not, you can also type \login. Once you click this, it'll tell you Claude Code can be used with your Claude subscription or build based on API usage through your console account. How would you like to set up? Now, in our case, we're using the cheapest, most effective method, which is the Pro, Max, Team, or Enterprise subscription. It's also the most straightforward, which is why it's the one that I used in this course. I'm just going to click Enter. And then it'll log you into your Claude account, the one that you just set up a moment ago. Once we're done, you're all set up for Claude Code. You can close this window, then Alt-Tab back, and you'll see that it's going to say just press Enter to continue. Now, just so we're all on the same page here, all we've really done so far is we just opened up a chat interface with an AI model. It's just instead of it being like a nice desktop application or on the web, it's in our terminal. And the value here is instead of running an AI model on the web or in some distant cloud server, what we're doing now is we're running it locally on our computer. So we actually have the ability to take this model and then locally modify files on our computer, write scripts, write stories, write poems, restructure our file organizer, clean up our PC or our Mac. Like this thing is currently connected to my computer. And I'll run you guys through how permissions and all that stuff work later on in the course as talked about in the outline. But even this alone makes it extraordinarily powerful. So this screen can look pretty intimidating for beginners. Most people end up using the terminal flow, not the GUI flow. But I'm going to explain to you what you guys see here just for simplicity. In the top left-hand corner, you have that cute little Claude Code widget. I think it's supposed to be a crab or like a jellyfish, but it's adorable. Then you have Claude Code in the actual version up above. Underneath, you have the model that you're currently using. In my case, I'm using Opus 4.6. Then you have the plan that you're on. In my case, Claude Max. So this is a couple levels up in the Pro plan. And then, perhaps most importantly, you have the current working directory. As I mentioned to you a moment ago, this is working inside of your computer in a specific folder. And so Claude Code currently lives inside /users/Mixarive, which is basically like the home folder, at least on my Mac OS. Here is your previous command. And so I just wrote clear because I wanted to clear it all the way up and give you guys a fresh canvas. Here is where you actually insert the text. So when you type stuff, it pops up. Underneath here, it tells you the model again. Then it gives you various modes. So in my mode right now, I'm in bypass permissions. This is sort of like a dangerous mode. It's a mode that not a lot of people feel super comfortable with, but it's the mode that I prefer for knowledge work and intellectually valuable tasks. And I'll run you guys through more of that later on. But you can cycle through modes simply by clicking Shift and Tab, which I'll show you guys how to do. And then there's some additional information here. There's some version, the latest, and then over here is, at least in my case, the token readout. And you know what's really cool? You can actually adjust this. This sort of thing is your Claude Code status line, which I'm also going to run you through it. You can make it all colorful and all wonky and really fun. You can have it display whatever the heck you want. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, hey, how's it going? And immediately after, I'm going to take a screenshot so I can show you guys some more information. So opening this up in my drawing tool, what ended up happening is immediately after we said, hey, how's it going? You see that another prompt showed up called finagling. This is one of like 1,000 different words that Claude Code uses. Basically, anytime it's thinking, it's going to use some processing or, I don't know, or considering or what things you can customize. Next, you have the number of seconds that your query has lasted. So I just said, hey, how's it going? And then 2 seconds in, it's now produced token for me. The word, but at least for the purposes of most of what you do, you can a word. For instance, I said, hey, how's it in tokens, but I'll just store a few more if that. So piece of text and really important. And that's how much basically conversation history you have in the current instance of Claude Code. This becomes really important later when you're designing better context management techniques, which is a big portion of what this course is going to be all about. Because at least as of the time of this recording, context management is sort of like the big bottleneck in getting these systems to do more and better for you. You'll also notice that on the right-hand side, my token counter, my status line here, it went up significantly. And so basically what this means is at about 20,000 tokens or so, we're about 10% of the way through our entire conversation thread that's allotted to us. What's really cool is Claude Code will take all of that history and at regular intervals, it'll actually compress that for you by increasing the information density, taking a string of text and then making it higher information density and higher information density and higher information density successively, so that even if you wrote something in kind of like a bloated way, a way that you could have used fewer words to say, as your context goes up and longer, Claude will automatically manage that for you to ensure that you're within the window. So that's how to set up Claude Code in the terminal. Hopefully we're all on the same page. Terminals are really similar to graphical user interfaces, which I'm about to show you in a moment. I do recommend that you guys get used to using it in terminal because when you use it in terminal, you basically unlock even more functionality. You can run a bunch of these side by side. You can run different terminal tools and whatnot that give you guys fast refresh times, and we'll cover that sort of stuff later. But what I want to do now is I want to show you guys how to run it in a graphical user interface. And these graphical user interfaces are typically managed by what's called an integrated development environment. Well, that takes us to the next logical question, which is, Nick, what is an integrated development environment? An integrated development environment, also termed IDE, is basically 3 things put together, okay? It's a file folder organizer plus a text editor plus an AI chat widget. Similar to what you get if you go on chatgpt.com or claude.ai. So you know how on my Mac, if I go Finder, I open up a basically series of folders where I can select different files and open them up and so on and so forth. You can do the same thing on Windows if you just type in folder or I don't know, the C drive or whatnot. Well, an IDE is basically that plus something like Notepad or Notes plus something like ChatGPT all in one. And right now, we have 2 major IDEs that the market is tending towards. The first is called Visual Studio Code, and the second is called Antigravity. Visual Studio Code is sort of like the OG one, because Antigravity is actually built on it. It was developed a lot longer by Microsoft. It's really, really extensible. It has great support, and it's very straightforward. So I'm going to show you guys how to set things up on it. But Antigravity, I would consider to basically be Visual Studio 2.0. So not only does it have most of the same features now, although it is, some of them are still kind of a little beta-ish, it's also a lot more modern. And then there's a much bigger focus on AI, which is obviously kind of the whole point of this course. So I'm going to be showing you guys initially how to set things up in Visual Studio Code. Then I'm going to do Antigravity, and then for the rest of the course, we're just going to be doing all of our work inside of Antigravity. And Antigravity is really cool. There's some additional functionality within Antigravity, not even tied to Claude Code. So the first thing we need to do is obviously we need to set up Visual Studio Code. In order to do that, just head over to Visual Studio Code on Google over here and then download for whatever your specific application is. In my case, I'm downloading the Mac OS. I'm then going to have the download appear in the top right-hand corner. I'm then going to give that a click and then go download unverified file. And then over here on a Mac, you again have to drag a little window over. So I'm just going to do it. Once you're done, okay. Something else. I said it was like a file editor. Well, that's what this little left-hand side is about. So I can open a folder on my computer. So I just go and open, I don't know, left-click contact. Okay, so now I'm inside of the left-click contact folder, and you can see we have some files here. I gitignore, claude.md, contact, index, and a netlify.toml. We're going to go through all that sort of stuff in a moment. It's not super important for now. But this is sort of like where the file explorer functionality comes in. If I were to click on one of these, as you can see, we've now opened up a big text editor right in the middle of the screen. And so this is a bunch of CSS. It's a programming language. What's really cool is with Claude Code, you don't actually have to know how to read any of this stuff. It'll just tell you everything. And so that is the text editor functionality. I can make changes. Hey, what's up? I could create a new file here if I wanted to called message.md, and I could say, hey, how's it going, YouTube? So just like in that way, we basically have file editing functionality, and then we can tell files to work on and stuff like that. And then on the right-hand side, you have an agent tab, which is where you have your chat interface with AI. Now, right out of the gate, the VS Code chat interface is actually Claude Code. In order to access Claude Code, you have to download it as an extension. So I'm running you guys through that right now. On the left-hand side here, click on these little blocks, then just type Claude Code. You'll see a variety of these. The one that you're looking for is the one that's developed by Anthropic, the one with that little check mark in it. Be very wary of downloading extensions that are not from official developers and vendors like Anthropic, simply because people have been known to insert malware and different things like that in these. So it's very important that you preferential this. In my case, the evaluation wizard here. Then once you're done, have access to Claude Code. Question is, okay, I have that code. How do I actually use it? Well, it's really easy. If you just go to the top right-hand corner of this little agent window, you now can just click on Claude Code. But you'll also see that there's a Claude logo up here as well. Well, what the hell does this mean? If you click on this, you'll open up just like another window. And in my case, I open it up with the terminal default. So it's going to open up this in the terminal. This could be pretty intimidating and kind of noise juggling all these things. I'm just going to zoom in so it's easier for us to see. So my recommendation is the one on the right. That one's simpler. And as you see, it's a different user interface than the terminal. Okay, so how exactly do you use this? And what are all of the different features and buttons and stuff like that? Covering the interface, obviously up top, you have the past conversations tab. And so as you build up more conversation history, you'll actually be able to jump back to any prior conversation you've had with Claude Code over here. You can do that both locally and then on the web. I don't have access to either of these yet because I just set this up fresh for you guys. Underneath that, you have the Claude Code logo. Underneath that, you have that cute little jellyfish or lobster, whatever the heck it is. Underneath, you have your little chat window. So here's where I can actually talk to Claude. Hey, Claude, what's up? Once we open this, you'll see that similarly to how we had before, we have that little accomplishing, fidgeting, where we have that little like process text come up. After that, you then have the response. The response comes in this little window, although you'll see it's different when it accesses files and stuff like that. Underneath at the very bottom left-hand corner, you have the various permission modes. Remember how earlier mine said dangerously skip permissions? We can do the same thing here. If you just click on this, you can cycle through all of the different possible modes, and you see that little window around the chatbot also changes. So in my case, I'm asking before edits, which means because this is running locally on my computer, before it makes any changes to any local files, I'm going to say, hey, just ask me to make sure. Now this is pretty safe, and a lot of people, especially coders and developers that are a little more old school, will usually work like this. But personally, given that when Claude's really in the thick of things, it's asking me for edits every 5 freaking seconds. If you really want to unlock that productivity, as I talked about before, you either use edit automatically or use bypass permissions. Plan. You can cycle through all different possible modes, and you see that little window around the chat box. You just click on this, you can cycle through all. Now this is pretty safe, and a lot of people, especially coders and developers that are a little more old school, will usually work like this. But personally, given that when Claude's really in the thick of things, it's asking me for edits every 5 freaking seconds. If you really want to unlock that productivity, as I talked about before, you either use edit automatically or use bypass. Right of that is, and this is kind of intimidating, this is the file that is currently being fed in as context. So for instance, you see how here it says index.html, and if I click this, I get this little eye icon. Well, if I leave this open, basically Claude is currently looking at this file. So what file are you looking at right now? It'll now tell me that it's looking through the index.html that's open in my editor. It hasn't read through the contents because reading through the contents of this massive file would feed a fair amount of text, which would charge me a fair amount of money. So right now it's not doing that. But suffice to say, I can actually edit this in real time. Let's change the title to Nick's YouTube example. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through my file. It's going to find the title, which is listed right over here, and it's going to change that for me. This is an example of a really simple, easy, and straightforward change, but I could do way more. I could refactor this whole thing from dark mode, light mode. So I'm actually going to ask it to do so. Refactor this index.html from dark mode to light mode. And if you don't know what this means, it's okay, bear with me. We're actually going to rebuild a whole app using Claude Code and various design patterns in a moment. The first thing it'll do is it'll try plan out the changes that it's going to make. And so it's a bunch of programming. Like it's filtering out a bunch of different CSS. And you don't need to be a programmer to understand what's going on. We basically now given this a task, it's deconstructing the task into a list of possible steps. Then it's going to go through and it's actually going to present this plan to me for me to say yes or no to. Now you'll notice that when I did this, in addition to the interface changing and now the colors being blue, in the bottom right-hand corner, we now have sort of a little pause button. This pause button is pretty important because it allows us to actually stop the Claude Code execution in process, so like while it's working. So I could theoretically change this at any point in time, okay, and I can actually pause it, and then maybe I could give it some more instructions or I don't know, tell it to do something differently. So I'm actually going to click this little button, then I'm going to go to bypass permissions. I'll say no plan, just do it. And what I've done is I've interrupted the process in the tool call, and now it's going to go through, and instead of having to do this big fat plan, I'm just going to say, it's the wild, wild west, buddy. Just get in there and start making some changes. When I did this, you'll notice that there's now a thinking tab that's open. If you click on this, you can actually peer into the internal thoughts of Claude as it goes through and accomplishes your request. So in this case, it said the user wants me to just refactor the dark mode to light mode with planning. Let me read the whole file, understand all the colors, and then make the changes. And as you see, we just had some changes made, which is what this little blue thing is here, showing that we've made the changes. So immediately after thinking, and then did some more thinking, then down at the bottom, it's now updated a bunch of the sections of code. And it's simple to Claude Code through the graphical user interface. And there are a couple of additional things, like you can click on this button to attach files and folders and use the browser. You can also check all of the commands here, which are pretty powerful stuff, and I'll cover them all in due time. So that's Claude Code in Visual Studio Code, VS Code. Let's now cover how it looks in Antigravity, how to set that up. And immediately after, we're going to build an actual real web app using Claude Code. As expected, Antigravity is pretty similar. They have a website here called antigravity.google. It's very sexy and clean. Wouldn't be surprised if they built this with agents. You just click download for whatever your specific operating system is. In my case, macOS with Apple Silicon. You give that click. Then it'll go through that same process that we just did for VS Code. Once you open up Antigravity, it looks very similar to what we just saw a moment ago with VS Code. And that's because the two are sort of built on each other. So just like VS Code was both a file explorer, a file editor, a notepad, and an agent manager, you can see here we have those three same ideas. On the left side, we're going to have the folders. On the middle, we're going to be able to edit the text of the files that we work with. And then on the right-hand side, we can actually talk to agents. First thing I'm going to do is I'll click open folder, and we'll go back to left-click contacts just so you guys can see what we're dealing with. And you'll understand here that the UX is just slightly different than what we had earlier. Some things are indented. We have like some little cool symbols on the left-hand side of the file. This isn't super important, but I just think Antigravity looks cleaner, which is why I like using it. In the middle here, if I click this index.html, you'll see that we also have the text pop up just like we did earlier. And the only real difference between Antigravity and VS Code is just what we have on this right-hand side. Earlier, we could have used Claude Code really easily because there was an actual dedicated Claude Code button. Right now, there isn't. In order to access Claude Code, assuming that you've installed it, so over here, Claude Code for VS Code, give that installation button a click. Assuming that we've installed it, what we have to do instead is we have to double click somewhere here and then click on this little Claude icon, okay? And then just delete the agent icon, and now you have the same layout that we had earlier in VS Code, just now you have it with Claude Code. The reason why is just because Anti-Gravity is a Google product, so they try and push the Google Gemini series of models. That's what we had on the right-hand side earlier. And to be clear, this is a Claude Code specific course, but you can also use whatever model you want to do whatever purpose. Like the model type is less important than just the fact that you're really good at using it and the fact that it's smart. So exact same layout here. Not going to cover it anymore. Let's get into actually building some stuff. So let's now build our very first